All right, go ahead and start here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. I'm not a professor, but you can call me Nap. And welcome to our second official spooky stream of the season. That's right. Hope everybody's having a great weekend so far. Trying to think. If you weren't here yesterday, I did do a another 2 Point Museum stream yesterday where we finished our space museum. And then after that one, we're gonna now that we've finished our space museum, we finished all of like uh the main museums for that map. And now we get to go on to the DLC. So that'll be the next stream when we do that is when I'll get the DLC and work on all that fun stuff. But yeah. Um not much has really changed since then. I've since I last streamed about like 24 hours ago. Um but Today, we're going to be doing more what we did on Wednesday, which, if you weren't here for that, it was reading 100 plus year old ghost stories that I found in old newspapers. We found some really cool ones last stream. Some of them were like, like real, like, like news stories in terms of like actual things that supposedly like happened, but a lot of them were actual like fictional stories. And what was interesting was that majority of the ones that we found, again, continuing a trend I noticed from the last year when I did this, was that majority of the fictional ghost stories end with a like kind of Scooby-Doo style, where they end and it's like, oh, it wasn't a ghost all along, it was something else. um, but yeah. So we'll see what we find today. Yes, on the last stream, we also looked at all the newspaper articles that we looked at were specifically from the state Vermont. I just picked a state at random, and that was just the one that I decided. And they're also all ranging from between the year 1910 and 1920, because I think that's kind of like a good middle ground. Because what I've kind of realized when trying to look for some of these is that once you get past kind of like 1920, it becomes a lot harder to find specifically articles about ghosts because movies and TV shows start to like become a thing and talked about more in newspapers and stuff. And so it's a lot harder to kind of like find like actual genuine stories that like try to talk about ghosts. Um so I found this like 1910 1920 range is a pretty good range. Um but The state that I decided to go with today, I decided we should maybe move. We started in New England, and I figured, you know what, let's move a little bit further south. And I just picked a random state in like the kind of the Mid-Atlantic region, and I went with Maryland. I decided to go with Maryland today because it's like it's a state that's like pretty populous. Like it has like Baltimore and DC is also right nearby. But it's not like huge in terms of population compared to like New York City or Pennsylvania. Um, and I'm hoping that it has enough kind of like diverse, like with the Chesapeake Bay and everything like that, that it has enough like diverse kind of like locations and everything to like garner like different stories, but also a big enough like population in like Baltimore to get some stories from there as well. Um, so that's what we're going to be doing today. And so I think let's just go ahead and jump into it with this. I'm going to go ahead and switch on over to our camera scene here. All right. So, like I said, all of these are going to be specifically from Maryland. Like I picked up earlier. Hey, Wayward Bard, good to see you. Love that. Thank you. I worked very hard on it. It's a great, it's a great costume, for the spooky season. So welcome on in. We are, like I said, so I've gone through and I've picked a couple stories so far. And some of them range from being fictional stories to like actual um ghost stories to ones that actually like try to dispute like ghosts and stuff like that. So we'll kind of just go through these in no particular order really and just kind of go for it. I want to start maybe with like some of like the shorter ones for now so we can kind of wait for maybe like, more people to show up before we get into like the really long ones. So I'm going to start with a shorter one. Um so let's go ahead and let's see. Okay, this is a really short one. So let's just start with this one here. So this is apparently The Man Who Saw a Ghost. This is from the Frederick Post, October 2nd, 1912. Um and it looks pretty. Is this in like the fictional section? Uh Jane Stone's comments. What a bright girl thinks about men, women, and things. Oh, so this is like her comments on like a ghost story, maybe. All right, so let's see what she has to say about this. All right, The Man Who Saw a Ghost. A watchman at a railway crossing has recently refused to stay on duty unless another man stayed with him. He insisted that in the watches of the night he saw a ghost. Being of a somewhat nervous nature, he didn't propose to see it again. I understand he has sufficient company now to still his fears. The ghost may walk or not walk as it will. Now, a railway crossing is certainly a very likely place for seeing ghosts. I know a dangerous, particularly unprotected crossing in a town called Camden, where the ghosts of dead men, say at least a dozen, might easily congregate. The ghost is said to linger for a time at the place where what was once its body met its death. Ghosts are haunting in more ways than one, but this deadly fear of them, science is telling us these days that ghosts are nothing more than astral bodies, one of which we each possess. Superstition is rapidly departing. A few years hence, and fear of ghosts will be less common. Uh, uh, it is less common now, or less commode. It is less common now. That's interesting. So she doesn't really give any details of like where this particular ghost crossing is, but I think that this bit right here at the end is interesting. Science is telling us these days that ghosts are nothing more than astral bodies, one of which we each possess. Superstition is rapidly departing. A few years hence, and fear of ghosts will be less common. I'm gonna look up that word real quick because I've actually never seen that word before. Um, what does that word mean? Or they just misspelled common. I think they just misspelled common. Yeah, I'm pretty because there's nothing that comes up. Yeah, that's what happened. All they did was misspell the word common. That's funny. Okay. So that was a good little start. Not really that scary because it's more kind of like, again, this is kind of one of those that's kind of like not debunking, but it's just showing, especially down here, superstition is rapidly departing. And it's less common now. So I think what's interesting is I just read a book um, that I'm actually doing for our Halloween. It's a research book that I'm reading for research for our Halloween stream, which will be on Wednesday the 29th, I think. Yes, the 29th. And what's interesting is that in that book, I just read a section that talked about briefly how belief in like spiritualism and stuff like that became less like kind of like, and like it became more superstitious and became less like not accepted, maybe is the wrong word, but just less as like popular around this time period. After kind of like the turn of the 19th or 1900, it started to become less popular. And this is honestly, interestingly enough, like helping kind of like prove that. Which means I think I'm gonna keep this one. I'm gonna hold on to this newspaper article and maybe use it for that stream. All right. So let's go ahead and let's read this next one here. That was a really short one, and this one I think is pretty short too. Oh, it's very short. Ask outside help to capture a ghost? Newton, New Jersey residents afraid to tackle spook. Help wanted. Anyone to grab a ghost, only to have his hands pass through it as though smoke, clutching nothingness. Come on out here and try it. The ghost is waiting, but none of the men of this place appear keen to learn just what a ghost feels like. This up-to-date ghost is a quiet, orderly one. He never utters dismal moans, nor does he inhabit a graveyard, which has caused some skeptics to doubt if it is a real ghost after all. Women and girls in the residential section of Pine and Sussex streets have been driven almost into hysterics for a week by the appearance, each night, of a man or a ghost, as many now regard him. He roams about the outsides of homes, but makes no noise, and has offered harm to no one. Some brave male residents fired guns in the air, hoping to frighten the mysterious nocturnal visitor, but the ghost appeared not even startled. Huh. I mean, it sounds like maybe just a guy going on a walk in the neighborhood. Especially at the 1920. Okay, this is from January 20th, 1920. From a newspaper called the Daily Banner. Where is it? Does it say where it's from? Cambridge, Maryland. Okay. This honestly does just kind of like sound like somebody's just like going for a walk. And maybe he's being a creep and like kind of like looking into people. Well, does he say he roams around the outside of home? So is he like snooping, like trying to like get in or like peek in? If he is, then like, yeah, that's creepy. And I mean, he makes no noise. Maybe he's just good at his job. He's good at being spooky. Maybe that's all it is. Hey, Pirate, good to see you. Welcome on in. But yeah, that's, that's not really that scary. And could probably, again, just be a guy. Reliable yeast powder. Oh, for a second, I was just like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, yeah. The old reliable yeast powder makes every bake day a success. White, flaky biscuits, light, spongy cakes, gems that melt in your mouth. It's Rumford. Go buy it. Yeah, I mean... Oh, then I think what's more scary is probably this right next to it. This is the horror. Early 1900s medicine. Pneumonia often follows a neglected cold. Kill the cold. Pills, cascara, quinine, bromide. Take Rover's tasteless chill tonic. It warms the body by purifying and enriching the bicod. You can feel its strengthening, invigorating effects. Well, thankfully, I think this is after like the Food and Drug Act in the U.S., so it's probably not as bad, but still. In a tablet form, safe, sure, no opiates. There we go. Apparently, there's no opiates in it. Breaking up a cold in 24 hours relieves grip in 3 days. Money back if it fails. Bromide is used to combat nerve agents. Jesus. And apparently it also kills the cold. Or maybe it just like killed the cold because it killed the people who took it. That's the other way I see this going. That's crazy. That's, yeah, like you said, that's the horror right there. That's more scary than this. Than just a story about probably just some creepy guy going by wind. Honestly, to be fair though, if they didn't say it was a ghost and they said it was just like some guy like being creepy and like looking in windows or like stalking around like houses and stuff, that to me is way more terrifying than a ghost. Like, because that can actually happen. Anything like that where it's like it can actually happen. That's what uh that's what scares me way more than like traditional horror stuff. Also epilepsy, if I remember. Wow. Huh. I mean, maybe they tried to use it for the cold and then they realized, hey, this also helps stop seizures or helps combat them. All right. So that one's done. Let's go ahead and let's move on to maybe one of the... Let's see. We got a few here. Let's go ahead and read this one. This one's a bit more of like an actual like story, and we'll see how this one is. Quinine is anti-malaria as well. Interesting. This thing, I guess that stuff is just like a combo of just like everything. Wow. It's why the upper crust of British military did not get malaria because they were on gin and tonics on the Africa. Oh, huh. Guess that makes sense. Before, you know, kind of vaccines became a thing. That was probably the best you could do at the time, and just hope for the best. All right. So let's go ahead then and let's read this next story here. We got a daily short story here. When Ghosts Communed by Dorothy Douglas. Copyright 1913. Oh yeah, no, that definitely sounds like it was accidental. Stuff like that most of the time is accidental. Most discoveries, honestly, are accidental, especially when it comes to medical stuff, historically. All right. When Ghosts Communed by Dorothy Douglas. The feud between the Lanes and the Moores had existed through 2 generations. It was young Roger Lane's grandfather who had fallen in love with Kate Moore's grandmother, when that dainty little lady was even then a wife and mother. Fortunately, for the honor of the Moore family, and before the crisis came, Kate's grandmother had quietly passed away with the sad knowledge that she loved a man other than her husband. In that former generation, the lovers had been wont to meet at the foot of the old garden that lay hidden from the windows of the 2 dwellings. Since that time, the gate connecting the gardens has been locked, and the estrangement between the families grew and took on added bitterness even as the ancient lock gathered rust. It was said and firmly believed by many inhabitants of the old world village that the ghosts of the lovers still haunted the garden and were frequently seen communing among the flowers and trailing about in the moonlight. Scarcely a soul in the village would have dared to enter that secluded garden after the town clock had struck 12. "It is haunted," had been whispered from the lip to ear of 2 generations. I don't know why they say whispered when they clearly have the exclamation at the end of that sentence there. And and the riot of flowers that held many memories, both sweet and bitter, were left to their own tender care. It was Kate Moore, the younger, with her intrepid spirit and love of romance, who ventured down into the garden one night when the village was wrapped in slumber. She had returned from school after an absence of 3 years. "If Roger Lane's ghost comes here," she mused, "I want to see it." She laughed softly as her feet touched the mossy grass of the garden, and her long robe trailed in tiny ripples behind her. She had dressed herself in ghostly raiment that her actions might not be mistaken for those of a mortal. The rusty lock fell apart, and Kate found herself trembling slightly amid a kingdom of sweet-smelling flowers. She stood still for a moment, both hands pressed to her heart. It was beating rapidly with the wonders of the flowers that erected their odorous heads to the moonlit night. Roger Lane, the younger, opening his eyes suddenly, blinked, rubbed his eyes, and sat up. He had been having his midnight smoke in the garden and had dozed off. From behind a clump of hedge plants. He kept fascinated eyes fixed upon the vision that had entered into his domain. "Give me a ghost girl if they are all like this one," he ejaculated under his breath. "Her hair is like a lost moonbeam, and the light in her eyes." Roger's vocabulary failed him, and he drew a sharp breath. Kate had drawn near to him, and with a little soft laugh had knelt down to bury her face within the heart of a great pink rose. "You perfect beauty," he heard her exclaim. She paused for a moment, as if thinking, while her eyes roamed comprehendingly about the garden. "Someone has been nurturing every flower in this place." She continued her peregrination, and Roger Lane heard from time to time tinkling laughter and joyous delight in the flower. He dared scarcely to breathe, so fearful he was of losing her. In his spotless flannels and white silk shirt, he, too, might well be mistaken for a ghost. His head, with its mass of sunny hair, resembled a Greek god carved in marble. Dang, what a description. Kate tripped swiftly toward the clump of hedge plants. It was as if a hand had dragged her. Arriving there, she caught a sharp breath, again put both hands over her heart, and did the only sensible thing a girl could do under the circumstances. Lane jumped swiftly to his feet and took into his arms a figure that had crumpled down at his feet. Her head fell back against his arm, and Roger trembled when her hair swept over his hand. There was a tiny fountain in the center of the garden, and toward that masculine remedy for all fainting women, Roger carried his burden. Very gently he dabbed water upon Kate's white brow. Very gently and very slowly Kate's eyes opened and shone full upon Roger. So suddenly had been the ensnaring of his heart that when he reluctantly released Kate from his arms, Roger felt as if he had relinquished the world and all that lived therein. He stood still, hardly knowing what his tongue might utter when it finally broke bounds. "I am not a ghost," Kate said. "I think I realize that," Roger told her, and in the moonlight a blush rose grew in Kate's cheeks. "We are enemies," was Kate's next comment. Roger stood for a moment in deep thought. Then he pointed to the wide marble bench that lay almost hidden in a bower of wistaria. "Come," he said gently, "let's talk it over." Kate followed him through a tiny area, and they sat down on a bench that had held the ancient lovers. "Her grandfather made my grandmother love her," Kate began accusingly. "She loved him in return, remember that," Roger put in self-defense. Kate's head dropped slightly. "People cannot help loving one another," Roger continued in a gentle tone. "It is the same today as it was then, and will be until the end of the time. Isn't it so, Ghost Girl?" Kate's fingers fluttered against a great wisteria bloom, and she drew it close to her lips. After inhaling its fragrance, she laughed quickly. Yes, it is true, but if two peoples cannot meet, they cannot fall in love. She turned mocking eyes upon him. If they have already fallen, the man can always find a way to see the girl, Roger said. Take, for instance, you and I. His tone was light, but deep in his eyes, Kate saw something that made her tremble. Oh, God. If we loved one another, I would suggest that we become, for the next few weeks, a couple of ghosts. Every night, as the village clock struck 12, you would come into this garden that I have been making beautiful for someone whom I might one day love. At the same time, I would enter. We would commune here for a half hour or so, and in the end, there would be an elopement, or ghosts. Kate was trifle breathless, but she managed to say quickly, "You are a very heartless man to want to run off with the only ghost in the village. What would the inhabitants do for a haunted garden?" "What would the other ghost do without its mate?" Roger asked and waited breathlessly for his answer. "He would probably be most unhappy and moan continually about like the wind down a chimney," laughed Kate. "That would be far worse than stealing the one ghost," Roger said, and made a horrible sound like a soul in search of a lost treasure. "Will the ghost consent to enter the garden each night as the clock strikes 12? He demanded softly. Kate smiled at the eagerness in his eyes. "Perhaps 11 o'clock would be better," she whispered and slipped off into the night. Okay. I mean, for a while there, I thought it was going to get kind of creepy, but that was actually kind of sweet. Overall, kind of, a little, weird that they had all these stories about the ghost, but, like, the one guy was still... Also, why would the gate still be locked if, like, the one guy was still going in there? Like, the rust lock? It was alright. Not the best, of the ones that we've read. I give it, like, a 5 out of 10. And honestly, not spooky at all, because it turns out there weren't any ghosts. Again, continuing this pattern that we've seen in, like, all of them. All these fictional stories that, like, if it is a ghost, it's never an actual ghost. It's always something else. Okay, let's read... Okay, I wanted to read this one because I thought just the title was interesting. Again, an example of, like, things that were thought to be ghosts turning out not to be ghosts. All right, but this seems like a real example of it. It's not a fictional story. So let's read this one next. Ghost put behind bars of city jail. Accused of stealing flowers from graves in cemetery. Caught by the keeper. Disappearance of 40 fat hens nerves him to task of capturing Phantom. So specifically stealing flowers from the cemetery? I mean, I didn't think they were that well protected, or I guess that's considered stealing, but... Huh, okay. Anyway, let's read this. When the wind soughs mournfully among the tombstones of the Home Sweet Home Cemetery tonight at midnight as a signal for ghouls, elves, and ghosts to dance among the graves in celebration of All Hallows Eve, there is one of the Erie Company who won't be there. Oh my god, I didn't realize. Yeah, this is actually October 31st, 1913. This is Halloween. This thing was posted on Halloween. Look at that. And for the simple reason that all the occult powers of this ghost do not avail to melt the bars of his cell at the city jail. The ghost, whose name is Benjamin Latcher, and whose fleshly residence is Highlandtown, was committed to the ghost-proof hostelry by Justice Dean of the Northeastern Police District this morning on the charge of stealing flowers from the graves. Cemetery keeper on the watch. The capture of Latcher was the result of a little ghost breaking by George Dorbert, the keeper of the cemetery, and his son William. They had been watching the coming and going of a mysterious light for many nights, and trying to connect the ghost with the disappearance of flowers from the graves. About 6 months ago, people who had to pass the place at night began to see, way among the tombstones, a light flashing, disappearing, and then gleaming from another part of the dark cemetery. The rumor spread that the spirit of some dead person had come back to walk among the graves. 3 weeks ago, just after the disappearance of 40 of the gravekeeper's chickens, he and his son started on their ghost breaking. They had seen the light before, always from a safe distance. Okay, so they also knew there was something was there, but it's weird that he like the hens. I feel like that's more important that if somebody steals 40 hens than just stealing flowers from a graveyard, which is also bad, but like still, I feel like the hens kind of take priority in this case. Fate of his hens stirs Dorbert, but the possibility of the ghost eating his 40 fat hens put courage into the heart of Dorbert and robbed the nightly visit of its terrors. So Dorbert and his son William sallied forth armed with pistols and lanterns. In the distance, they saw the light flashing. William went forward with the lantern and one of the pistols to reconnoiter. Soon he came running back out of breath. Pop, the son gasped. He is about 7 feet tall, all dressed in black, and he was standing behind a tombstone, and a green light was coming from his eyes. Jeez. Pair returned to their fireside. They both returned hurriedly to the house. Night before last, Dorbert saw the light again. This time, he patrolled the boundary of the burying ground all night. When the night sky was paling and the dawn wind stirring, he saw a tall man crossing the cemetery with a huge bunch of, oh god, that flower in his arms. The ghost saw Dorbert and ran. Such unghost-like conduct gave speed to Dorbert, who gained so rapidly on the runner that he recognized him as Latcher. Thence to the police station came Dorbert, where a warrant was issued by Justice Dean. Then Sergeant Glenn, who fears neither ghost nor ghoul himself, haunted the woods in the neighborhood of Home Sweet Home last night. He arrested Latcher as the latter was stealing through the woods. Sometimes rests in cemetery. Judge, I does prowl the woods a goodish bit, you know. I am a partridge hunter, and I sometimes rest at nights in the cemetery, he told Justice Dean, while arraignment before him. I ain't particularly scared of graves and ghosts. Have you any reason to be in the cemetery at night? The magistrate asked. Sure, Judge, answered the prisoner. All the Latchers were buried there. Huh, grunted the keeper. We took all the Latchers up 2 years ago and carted them away. Latcher denied taking any flowers. He was unable to furnish bail and was committed to jail. Huh, so he denied that it was him stealing the flowers. But, I don't know. Hey, Techno, good to see you. Welcome on in. Yeah, he was probably innocent, honestly. It was so easy, especially at night, to get away with crimes back then. I mean, it could just been like, I feel like the hens and the flowers are probably two completely different people. Because I think it takes more than one person to steal 40 hens from one person, like, at night. That's like a whole operation right there. Yeah. That is the other point too. Yeah, why would he take the flower? I don't know, maybe to resell them? Maybe? I don't know. It just seems like such a small, like to, you know, like imagine you go to prison with other people and it's like, what are you in for? It's like, I stole flowers. That just seems like such a low stake like thing compared to a lot of these other ones. Okay. Let's go ahead then. Go for a next one. I'm starting to think this one here might be the same story. Because this is a few days before the other one. I think this is that same... Yeah, Evening Sun. Because, yeah, this one is October 29th. The other one was October 31st. I think this is the same story. Boy in cemetery, real ghost breaker. Saw a phantom in black that was 7 feet tall. Intruder arrested. Neighbors join in all-night vigil. There it is again. It is captured. Yeah, this is the same story, but this is like before. I probably should have read this one first. So hold on, let's see if there's other information in this. And see like how many people actually thought it was a ghost. Baltimore has a real ghost breaker in the person of 15-year-old Michael Dorbert, son of George Dorbert, keeper of Home Sweet Home Cemetery, Biddle Street and Loney Lane. Keeper's house is in the center of the cemetery, with tombstones lined up all about the place. Michael is not afraid of ghosts, not any more than H.B. Warner is in the play at one of the theaters this week. Bobbing light scares the neighborhood. About 6 months ago, people living near the cemetery began to talk of a ghost that appeared night after night, sometimes in one part of the grounds and sometimes in others. If it wasn't a ghost, it was a twinkling, bobbing light, now here and now there. It created a lot of excitement, and many folks stayed up to watch it. Then for a time, it disappeared. Several nights ago, the light was seen again. Young Dorbert, insisting that he wasn't afraid of ghosts, volunteered to investigate. Along about midnight, the light was seen twinkling behind a tombstone not far from the keeper's house where Michael lived. He noted the spot and hastened toward it. There was nothing, no light, no ghosts, when he got there. Michael did a 100-yard dash back to the house in record time. It showed up again last night. The disappearance of the light then, when Michael approached, added to the strength of the ghost story. Last night, several neighbors and Michael's father joined in the watch for the visitor. After a while, the light began to bob around. Michael volunteered to sneak up again. The others waited on the porch. Just as the boy reached the spot where the light had been, it vanished. Michael beat it back to the waiting group at the house. I saw him. He's 7 feet tall. I saw him, he said. He's about 7 feet tall and is dressed in black. He was behind the big elm tree. The group of watchers took up the search, but the light didn't show again all night. George Dorbert searched the grounds until dawn. About 6 o'clock this morning, he saw Benjamin Lacher, a well-known character in northeast Baltimore, coming out of the cemetery down by the gate. He was carrying a big armful of autumn flowers and leaves. Dorbert at once connected the recent mysterious disappearance of plants and flowers from the cemetery with the ghost and the light. He got a warrant for Lacher, charging him with cutting and taking the plants and flowers. So I guess technically it is cemetery property, so like I guess that explains why you would be charged with that. It's the first time he has ever... It's the first time he ever was a ghost. Lacher is known through the northeastern section in many roles. This is his first appearance as a ghost. He is a naturalist, according to his own statement, and he has a pet snake 6 feet long. At one time, it is said he captured a lot of young buzzards, pulled the feathers out of their heads, and sold them to a local birdman as bald eagles. Jeez. Yeah, that's crazy. Mutilating buzzards to sell fake bald eagles. I guess he just heard the term bald eagle and just like thought, okay, so they have to be bald at the top. That's how that works, right? That's totally how that works, 100%. But what's interesting, though, is that this naturalist part was completely missing from the other one. And that would maybe explain more why he would take the flowers. Now, it is technically still stealing and everything like that, but I mean, it has a little bit of... It's like... It makes it seem a lot less of, like, you know, a done out of malice, you know, kind of thing, or he's trying to resell them, something like that. I mean, naturalists deal with all kinds of nature. I mean, you know, people would like, you know, collect specimens and press like flower pressing into like books and stuff like that. That's been popular for a long time, and that's how people, you know, preserve specimens and stuff like that. That's still, you know, I can totally believe it, you know. And that's the other thing too. They found him about like way later. It says here about 6 o'clock in the morning he saw Benjamin Latcher. Like he found him later, whereas like the other person was seen like around like what, midnight? Yeah, along about midnight the light was seen. So I don't think he was spending 6 hours in there. I think it was a coincidence. I think personally, I think Latcher is in it. I mean, well, I guess he did steal flowers, so I guess that he's technically not innocent of that. But I don't think he's the light. I think it's two different things going on, and he just happened to be at the wrong place, wrong time. That's interesting. Yeah, maybe the ghost. Ooh, yeah, the ghost is still there. Wait, hold on. What was the name of this cemetery again? Home Sweet Home Cemetery. Hold on. Uh, okay, it looks like the cemetery does still exist, but now it's called Home Family Cemetery. Oh, wait, hold on. This says okay, actually no, it doesn't exist anymore. Saint Alphonsus Cemetery. No longer in existence. Memorials were moved to the Most Holy Redeemer Cemetery. It was originally located in the section of Biddle Street and Edison Highway. Yes, Biddle Street was one of the things listed on in one of the newspaper articles. So yeah, this is it. Yeah, and it doesn't exist anymore. Huh. Interesting. Okay. So, let's go ahead and let's read another one here. Let's go ahead and read this one. It's called Ghost in Doorway. So let's see what this one is. I don't know. I think this one... It's not that long. And this might be... Yeah, it was a good one. I like just the more... Like, the realism of it. Or just, like, how... There is still kind of like a mystery kind of to it. And how we don't really 100% know, like, who Because I don't think Latcher did it. I think Latcher, he only took the flowers, but I think it's separate from the light. I don't think he's the light. That could be something else. All right, so let's go on. Let's see what this one is. Ghost in Doorway. Imagination is a queer thing, especially when it's a strong one and belongs to a 7-year-old girl who hasn't yet gotten over fairies and Santa Claus. Dang, harsh, all right. And this is 1911. August of 1911. um, Almost from the cradle, I had a fancy for spooks, and this fancy was fed by Grandma, who always had a store of ghostly tales on hand, which she related with great vigor and relish. Some friends and I had mysterious plays where white-sheeted ghosts ran loose, after which I usually had a spook dream and awoke my much endearing family. I guess that's, instead of saying nightmare, a spook dream. One cold winter evening, when night was falling and the people were hurrying to bright, cozy home and warm suppers, I was curried in a cozy big chair buried several yards deep in a ghost story. A green-shaded lamp burned in the center of the room and left all the rest in half darkness. I had gotten to the interesting part of my story when I raised my head and there was in the doorway, oh, a tall, white, misty thing. I tumbled downstairs much faster than I could otherwise believe possible to light and family. Laugh as you will, I was thoroughly scared. Though I long since have left behind such fancies, I never will forget my imagination ghost. Doris Williamson, age 12 years old. A 12-year-old wrote this? I think her parents helped her. Her parents probably helped her with this. Or somebody helped her. Or they edited it. Like the newspaper edited it. Spook Dream, I'll steal that. Yeah, it sounds very old. Like it almost sounds southern. Like I can imagine that being said with like a southern accent. Like, oh, you had another spook dream, honey? You know. It sounds like it has that like feel to it. And she said she was 7? Yeah. Yeah, so a 7-year-old. She was 7 years old when she saw this. And she was reading a ghost story, so, you know. And the fact that she also says, like, you know, though I have since have left behind such fancies, I will never forget my imagination go. So I think she's kind of admitting that she doesn't think it's real. I think she is saying that it's her imagination, which, you know, can make it interesting. Hmm. Filed My Anchor is another I'd love to read. I haven't heard that one. Huh. I didn't just read that in here, did I? Because yeah. It's wild they had their addresses along their full names as well. Society was something back then. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. That actually is a very more recent thing. Like, I've found plenty of newspapers, because this is from 1911. I've found newspapers as recently as like the 80s and 90s where people will just list the name of like addresses of people and their full names. This idea of like privacy and stuff like that is kind of more of a new development, I would say, because before, when, like, for example, like phone books, think about when phone books used to be around. That had a lot of, and a lot of phone books had people's addresses in them too. Like, it wasn't just phone numbers, it was also addresses of everybody in your town. So technically, everybody knew where you lived and everything. I think what's different now is that with the internet, it's a lot easier for people from outside your community to find that information. That's what's more scary nowadays. Because before, with this news, you know, this is the Baltimore Sun newspaper. Only people who live in Baltimore are going to read this. Where it's way less likely to, like, you know, be used, I feel like, maliciously, like, locally. Whereas, like, you know, now, because everything is so connected and accessible online, that the idea of, like, you know, sharing someone's address is a lot scarier because it can reach so many more people now compared to a newspaper or a phone book. Because also phone books were also local too. Like phone books were only given out to, like, you know, local, like around the local community. It's only really with the advent of the internet that I feel like that we've had this push to, like, sudden to, like, for privacy. And it comes off, you know, because we are so ingrained in that now, it comes off as very, like, weird and, like, crazy to see, like you said, full addresses in these newspapers. You know, Doris Williamson, 321 East Lafayette Street, or East Lafayette Avenue. You know what, actually, let's see. Hold on. Let's see if we can find that one. Let's see if we can find. Okay, 21. Yeah, 321 East Lafayette Avenue. Oh, here it is. It looks like it still exists. 321. Yeah, 321 East Lafayette Avenue. Is it this one? No, it's 324. Is it this one? Oh, yeah, that's it. Looks like it's been seen better days. Yeah, this is it. Still around. But, you know, it is Baltimore, so you do have to be careful which neighborhood you're in. Some of these, this is interesting. Some of these actually buildings don't look that bad. I think this is one of those neighborhoods they're trying to, like, revitalize. Because, like, some of these actually look, you know, pretty nice. Like these ones and stuff. But then you just go, like, one block over, and there's some more, you know, kind of, well, I mean, these don't look that bad. But yeah, I think it's an area that they're trying to revitalize. Okay. All right, interesting. Let's go ahead and let's read next. Let's read this one. Think Shore Haunted. People near Stony Creek agitated over story of headless ghost wandering about. Some say they saw Wraith, supposed victim of Alum Chine disaster, said to be wailing about his head. Ooh, this is because this is real. This is a real story from Baltimore. Stony Creek. Huh. Let's see where this one goes. All right. Old Ichabod Crane, the headless ghost who used to ride a horse through Sleepy Hollow on the Hudson, has an associate now in the headless wanderer of Stony Beach. Washington Irving wrote the story of Old Ichabod, and thousands of persons of many generations and countries have read of his doings. But comparatively, few persons have heard of the headless headless peripatetic of Stony Beach. A few years ago, as Baltimoreans will well remember, the steamship Alum Chine, with a big cargo of dynamite on board, was blown to bits down the river when a quantity of the explosive on a lighter alongside the ship went off. Many men at work on the vessel and on the lighter were killed, and some of them were literally torn to shreds. The bodies of some of the victims were never were identified, and a number were reported as missing. Made them see ghost. One day, Several weeks after the explosion, the body of one of these victims was washed up on the shore of Stony Beach. The sight of the body made a deep impression upon some of these who viewed it, so deep, in fact, that they began to imagine things and to conjure up the ghost of this victim. Before long, the story spread that this headless man had been seen prowling along the shore at Stony Beach and through the woods, woefully asking, "Where is my head? Who's got my head?" The queer. Well, how is he saying that if he doesn't have a head? How does that work? How can he ask if he has a head or not if he doesn't have his head? Before long, the story spread that this headless man had been... Oh, wait, yeah, we already read that. Also, I just realized that we're about to start ads soon. So actually, I'm going to pause real quick and just wait for the ads to finish before we continue on. So I'm going to just kind of chill here for a second. So if you also want to use this time, get a drink, stretch, you can do that too. Ooh. Oh. I have to admit, because I'm reading this so much, this is like the most like talking I've had to do on stream in a while. A lot of times when I do just like the research streams, they just what's it called? I can like kind of be quiet for like a little bit, just kind of like focusing on the research. But with these types of streams, I pretty much have to be talking the whole time because I'm reading, like truly reading. I don't mind it though. Okay, let me check something well, let me use this time to check something real quick. Okay, so okay. Okay, that's good to know. All right. We're about halfway through the ad now. So once that's done, we'll go ahead and we'll continue reading this story. What's interesting though with this one is that like it seems like the author of this article is already kind of like disproving it or like trying to like, you know, set up that like it's not real by saying that like the sight of the body made a deep impression upon some that who viewed it, so deep in fact that they began to imagine things and to conjure up the ghost of this victim. So this author is basically like kind of putting his own bias in there and saying like he doesn't think it's real. That's what he's basically saying here. Which is interesting. I feel like you wouldn't expect that from, you know, from something like this. Okay, looks like we got about like 30 seconds left on the ad. But it does kind of like, you know, help push that, you know, that whole idea that like the people who are in charge of these newspapers and writing these things don't seem to like ghost stories, honestly. Like they don't write them as if they really kind of like believe them, honestly. Which is really interesting and like I said, something that you would expect people from this era to be more superstitious, but honestly they're not, which is really interesting. Okay. Looks like ads are done. So let's go ahead and continue where we left off. I'll just read from the top of this section here where it says, made them see ghost. One day, several weeks after the explosion, the body of one of these victims was washed up on the shore of Stony Beach. The sight of that body made a deep impression upon some of these who viewed it. So deep, in fact, that they began to imagine things and to conjure up the ghost of this victim. Before long, the story spread that this headless man had been seen prowling along the shore at Stony Beach and through the woods, woefully asking, "Where is my head? Who got my head?" The query, it is said, was put in a tone of deep distress, long, drawn out, and weird. The story kept on spreading. This summer, a number of young men who heard the story and who were too matter-of-fact to swallow it determined to have a little fun. Thus, it was that on several nights recently, persons really saw figures with white cloths draped around them walking slowly in the neighborhood of the beach, moaning, "Where is my head? Who's got my head?" Some of the women folk have fled in alarm, and even some of the men have become panicky. So basically, what he's saying here is that these kids, like, they dressed up. That's what he's saying, is that determined to have a little fun. Thus, it was that several nights recently, persons really saw figures of white cloths. Yeah, that's what he's saying here. Again, is that it's not real. Newlywed takes flight. A young Baltimorean who was recently married went down to the shore a few days ago and was passing along the road with a companion when he heard the old, weird, lugubrious query. He stopped short for a moment in terror. "It's him! It's him! The headless ghost!" shouted his companion. "Run, run, run, run!" Benedict did not run, with his companion urging him to hasten. The newlywed turned the corner of a house quickly and fell headlong into the clump of bushes, gathering in his plunge a number of briars. Oh God, ugh, sounds painful. This young man told one of his companions who arrived home late that night all about his experience, but this companion, who was exactly of the same height as the headless one, merely chuckled. Wow, again, giving it a, yeah, couldn't scare Cook. Uh, let's see. There is one person who refuses to be pestered by the ghost. Uh, One night, not long ago, the wraith visited her home about midnight. He tapped on the window of her room and called out, "Where is my head? Who's got my head?" The cook sat up in the bed, considerably vexed. "Go away from here, man," she said. "I got to go to sleep." I'm guessing that's hell, because they censor her. "How in hell do I know who's got your head?" Then she went to dreamland again. Jeez. Yeah, it's, again, even in with like this story where it's like supposedly like a real thing that people are experiencing, they're selling it off. They're brushing it off basically as like it's not real. The best reply I've seen to a headless ghost. Yeah, well, here's my thing. How is he talking? If he's a headless ghost, how is he asking where his head is? Because he ain't got no mouth. How does that work? Because the headless ghost in Sleepy Hollow does have a actually. I mean, yes, his head isn't on his body, but the whole thing of that is that his head is like he still has his head. So at least if he talks, it makes sense, because he technically does still have the head. Like he has like, well, I mean, in some versions like the pumpkin head, but I don't know if that's the original to the story or not. But so it kind of makes sense that that one would still be able to talk. But this guy's got nothing. Interesting. Really interesting story with that one. Okay. Let's go ahead. Let's do another kind of longer one here. Let's do a longer one here of this one. All right, so this is from July 25th, 1915. This is a longer story called The White Ghost. How long is this one? Oh, wow, this is a... Yeah, this is a long one. The White Ghost by Frank Condon. All right, Frank, let's see what you got. Hold on, before I do this one, I'm going to take a quick drink. All right. Back in those old, vague, misty days, when you thought the next 12 years would be so different from the way they turned out to be, Nut Nelson dined in with the... Is it dined? Or something in with the immigrant tide, landed at Ellis Island, showed unquestionable credentials, and within a fortnight entered the employment of Elias Poindexter, the Wall Street operator and motorier enthusiast. Is that where the term Poindexter comes from? Hold on. Is that where that comes from? Hold on. I'm interrupting the story because I'm too curious next. Okay, apparently it was also the name of a character from the animated series Felix the Cat, which is an old like turn of the century around this time. Noted for his intelligence and use of scientific jargon. But it is an actual surname. Huh. So yeah, it is an actual like name, but it's also I think the way that we use it comes from apparently Felix the Cat, which is interesting. Huh. Okay, sorry. That was a side quest I had to figure out real quick. Anyway, I think it's just a coincidence that this Wall Street guy is also called that. Anyway, okay. The Dane had already established a reputation in the old country for daring and skillful race driving. He had broken 3 or 4 European records, had won races from 50 miles to 200, and had fed the odor of his petrol to some of the fastest French drivers of the period. Poindexter was pleased with his new man. Motor ears were new and strange objects, and racing in America was just beginning to kick its legs and claw around the counterpane. I mean, yeah, again, this is 1915. Cars were still very new at this point. In Wise old Broadway, the crowd rushed to the curb to watch the passage of the horseless vehicle and to comment pessimistically upon its future. One fine afternoon, a new machine rolled noiselessly through the city streets, a marvelous motor car of pure white, with a massive curved hood and huge tires. It was the White Ghost, imported from France by Elias Poindexter, and at the wheel, conscious of his importance, sat Nut Nelson. Oh, is this actually not about a ghost and it's about a car? Huh. Okay, hold on. Let's keep reading. But I'm pretty sure I'm starting to realize this actually might not be a ghost. It's actually going to be a car. The newspapers gave it a paragraph or two the following morning. Avoiding tiresome statistics, it can be stated here that Nut Nelson and the White Ghost stood American racing automobilia on its head. Millionaires banded together and constructed costly roadways. Courses were leveled out in New York State and elsewhere, and on any fine afternoon down Long Island Way, you might behold a long cloud of dust arising from the surface of the earth and known that Nut Nelson and the White Ghost were out on a practice spin, or were wiping up a flotilla of high-priced machines, the owners of which were under the impression that they were racing Elias Poindexter. It mattered not to the Dane whether daredevil young sons of affluence drove their own cars or employed for the purpose speed kings of Europe, whose names were spelled principally with Z's and S's. Nut and the Ghost gathered in cups and banners, medals and prize money, wagers and other loose articles connected with automobile racing, until Poindexter was forced to set aside a room in Stony Gables to contain the proud junk. But the hand of old Daddy Time, don't just call him. Why is he not called Father Time here? Why do you got to call him Daddy Time? But the hand of old Daddy Time will not be stayed for man or machine. Elias Poindexter's bald spot increased in area, and so did his wealth. Nut Nelson's short brown mustache faded off to gray, and the furrows deepened in his face. Poindexter boys went into Wall Street with father, and Zelma Poindexter came home from the finishing school with a perfect finish. With the added years came added motor cars, with modern fixings and jiggers known as the White Ghost. In the Poindexter garage at Stony Gables, half a dozen aristocratic machines hung over their drip pans, limousines, touring cars, and roadsters, with their 10-inch upholstery, disappearing seats, electric lights, and self-starters. The business of making automobiles had thrived. Improvements came in so rapidly that it was difficult for even a millionaire enthusiast to keep pace with them, and in the course of time, the White Ghost glided upon the elevator and was lifted to the second floor. With his own hands, Nut Nelson guided the old king to a darkened corner, and there, behind a defunct thrashing machine, the ghost folded its ancient hands and rested. Nut shed a tear or two and went downstairs to take up his new work. With the kindest of feelings, his employer had shifted him. A brisk young Irishman came into power. His name was Eugene Collins, and in the Poindexter livery, he was a smart, fashionable figure. Thereafter, the Dane had nothing to do with the Poindexter motor cars. Chauffeur Collins, whose mechanical knowledge was a joke in Nut's eyes, drove the family to town, took them to race meets, waited in front of theaters, and filled the position acceptably to all concerned. But what troubled the old driver was a vague knowledge of growing intimacy between Collins and the Poindexter girl. The chauffeur was a handsome, strapping man with a pair of laughing blue eyes and a ready tongue, and the long trips in the machine with Zelma as the only passenger sometimes worried the Dane. At 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the 20th, the gardener of Stony Gables beheld a strange spectacle. The big touring car, regarded by Elias Poindexter as the apple in his eye and the pride of the establishment, glided up to the entrance of Stony Gables, having made the run from New York City in record time. The millionaire stepped from the car and ran briskly up the steps. The Dane stared at chauffeur Collins in surprise, because, instead of starting immediately for the garage, the car remained at the entrance of Stony Gables. 2 minutes after her father had entered the house, Zelma Poindexter appeared, carrying a small bag, which she tossed into the tonneau of the machine. Then she leaped up beside driver Collins and kissed him. Petrified with amazement, Nut watched the car disappear through the gates, and its low hum grew fainter. And as its low hum grew fainter, he suddenly realized that the time had come for action. The watering pot dropped from his hand, and he sped across the lawn, up the steps, and into the hall of Stony Gables. and as he pulled open the door, the faint croon of the motor horn came to him from over the distant fields. So that's okay. So that's what this illustration is. Look at him, got his arms around him and everything, and I guess he's just jealous. Okay. Elias Poindexter, coming down the stairs, was suddenly confronted by a wide-eyed gardener who swung his cap in a circle and gasped, "She's gone. They've gone together. They've run away, skipped out the machine, eloped." "Who skipped out?" the millionaire demanded. "What are you talking about? What's the matter with you?" Briefly and with great speed, Nutt described what he had seen. And before he had reached the end of the sentence, Elias Poindexter turned and ran up the stairs at a gait rather amazing for one of his years and avoid du pose. He thrust open the door of his daughter's room. On her dressing table lay a letter directed to my dear parents, and its contents were simple and direct. These were the words: "We are going to be married, Eugene and I. I love each other. We love each other dearly. I will be useless to follow unless I will be useless to follow." "Useless!" Elias bellowed. "Useless! The scoundrel, the good-for-nothing rascal, and the fool girl. Nut, get out one of the machines. We'll go after this, Collins. And when we get him, I'll pull his worthless head off and feed it to him." Jesus. Mr. Poindexter indulged in a number of other pointed expressions. Other members of the family had not returned to Stony Gables and were consequently unaware of the exciting events. Following his puffing master, Nutt galloped down the stairs and across the lawn to the garage. And a moment later, master and driver became aware of a sickening fact. Chauffeur Collins had planned the skip-off with some attention to detail. One of the details was that the garage was empty. The other cars were in town, one of the engine repairs, the other for mythical tire troubles. "Which way did they go?" Elias demanded, mopping his face and turning a despairing look upon his gardener. "Down the old road to the right," Nutt replied, "and he got away fast." "They're heading for Newton," Elias moaned. "That Irishman has probably arranged to have a minister meet them, and here we are without being able to raise a hand. I wonder if I could telegraph. Could I catch a train and get there in time to save that foolish girl of mine? What can I do? Say something, you imbecile." The millionaire grasped Nelson by the shoulder and shook him vigorously. The Dane began to smile softly, largely and happily. That's very cartoony, just like the grabbing him and everything. "We'll get him, Mr. Poindexter," he shouted. They'll never reach Newton ahead of us. We've got a machine here, and if you lend me a hand, we'll have the ghost after them in 3 minutes. "The ghost?" Elias sneered. "Man, this is no time for joking. That old..." But Nutt Nelson was at the throttle of the elevator and halfway up. Elias sat down, panting, and presently he heard a familiar sort of sound from above, a soft rumble, followed by a series of staccato blasts. The white ghost was moving slowly across the upper floor of the garage to the elevator, blinking her eyes and wondering. An old Nutt Nelson was walking slowly beside her, his hand on the wheel and a blaze of pleased excitement in his eyes. 1 minute after she had made the turn and entered the public high road, her engine was drinking the gasoline with its old appetite. Her pipes were rattling like a battery of Gatlings. Pebbles and rocks were flying into the air behind her, and the telephone posts were checking off the speed at a rate of 50 miles an hour. Country villages went by like misty visions. An occasional countryman atop his load of produce sought the farthest side of the ditch and peered at the white specter that flashed by. "They are evidently in a great hurry," the white ghost reflected, "and I wonder why." A small cloud of dust arose far down the road, the highway that had once been part of a famous racecourse. Many at the time the ghost had hurried itself along that path. Out of the cloud of dust appeared the broad red back of the Poindexter touring car. And then it was that the complacent Collins turned in his seat and discovered a most surprising thing: a white, dusty, roaring motor car of ancient making make pursuing him. Zelma Poindexter looked over her shoulder at the pursuers and began to cry. From an easy, contented 30 miles an hour, Collins leaped ahead and then began a race that never has been entered in the official chronicles. Newton was still in the distance when it started, but chauffeur Collins now desired nothing of Newton, and the waiting minister could cool his heels. The principal idea in the Collins' mind was to escape. He had a distinct picture of what would happen when Nut Nelson and Elias laid avenging hands upon him, and in his pocket was $1,000 of Zelma's money. Oh, I think he's just doing it for the money. Eugene Collins was a chauffeur, but Nelson was a race driver, and if Collins drove in modern prodigy of speed and power, Nut knew the white ghost and the ghost knew the road. The speed of the two cars was almost even for a few moments, but the Poindexter Royal Empress was swaying from side to side under the terrific impetus of her 90 horsepower engine, and the frightened girl beside the chauffeur sat with her hands over her eyes. The ghost traveled like a bullet, straight, unswerving, and as steady as a clock. Without warning, the Royal Empress began to slow down. The race was over, but its end came abruptly. The rear wheels of the touring car struck a rut, swerved violently, and in another instance, the Empress skidded the width of the road, smashed into the ditch, and overturned. 10 seconds later, the white ghost glided up beside the wrecked car. From the ditched machine, Collins emerged, gazed about him stupidly, and then began to run. He crossed a patch of growing cabbages, gaining in speed as he ran, and an instant later disappeared in a field of corn. Poindexter and Nelson jumped from the ghost and dragged Zelma from under the car. She opened her eyes as her father gathered her in his arms, and a few moments sufficed to determine that she was not badly hurt. Elias was laughing, crying, and using profane language. Nut stood by, calmly clearing the grime from his goggles. The incident, so far as he was concerned, was ended. When his daughter finally stood on her shaking limbs, Elias gave thought to the vanished chauffeur. With difficulty, Nut persuaded him to abandon further chase and pointed out that the defeated eloper was beyond capture. Let him go, Nut advised. He's no good anyhow, and no harm's been done. Then Nut busied himself about the battered object that had once been the Royal Empress, while Elias put his arm around his daughter and comforted her. And that's about the end of it, except that the white ghost now loaf away the days on a sort of throne Nut constructed. Elias Poindexter has something of cars, big and small, and the white ghost certainly isn't comfortable or extremely handsome, but you couldn't buy it from old Poindexter with the wealth of Ind. I mean, that's either industry or India, which is said to be an exceedingly affluent place. Okay. This one was interesting, mostly because it wasn't a ghost story, but I got invested. As a story, it was pretty good. It was pretty good as like a story. I was engaged, and it did like draw me in. I was nervous that they were gonna do a thing, because at first I thought they were gonna do a thing of like, oh, Nut it was like, oh, Nut loved her and that's why he was going after her. But I'm glad they didn't go that direction. I'm glad that they kept it like, oh, it's just, he just, I guess, wanted to make sure she was safe and knew probably that the chauffeur was like just doing it for money, considering he had like $1,000 in the pocket. Okay. So yeah, not a ghost story, but an interesting story nonetheless. Okay, let's read another one. Okay, we read that one. Okay, here we go. This one I saw. Just the title caught my attention. So this is from 1912, The Evening Sun. Food and ghosts in Boy Scout camp. Connection denied by the boys, but it is very possible. So the boys are saying that there aren't any ghosts. Huh. From the Boy Scouts camp at Harper's Ferry, there comes a story which should make the cups and saucers rattle in the hands of families and at breakfast in 100 homes of scouts in Baltimore. Parents of hundreds of scouts and brothers and sisters must tremble as they read. Jeez, well, that's not. He's like preparing them for like a nightmare. Very reassuring for a newspaper to be like, hey, that place you send your kids, it should scare you. The flapjack record of Douglas Young and Douglas Higgin, established last week, was dealt the other day, a blow of which it will never recover. 14 flapjacks eaten at one sitting was the record for these boys. Well, at breakfast a few days ago, Scoutmaster Atkinson of the Hamilton Troop and William Marks of Troop Number 16 drew themselves close to the table, rolled their sleeves back, gave the belts of their waists a little room, and called, "Bring on the flapjacks!" Up until that minute, 14 flapjacks at one sitting had seemed impossible. Those flapjack eaters drew up on that record with the speed of the Congressional Limited on a level spot of ground with 20 minutes to make up. They passed it and the count mounted. 17, 18, 19. Then the cook swooned. Messrs. Hamilton and Marks are the undisputed flapjack eaters at the camp now. The cook was revived after a time, and he says that if anyone dares to suggest flapjacks to him for a week, he'll leave. I like this, but I mean, this has nothing to do with ghosts, but I love this story because I could totally see this happening at like a scout camp today. Like it's just a classic, like people haven't changed in 100 years. Because this is from 1912, and it's an eating competition amongst a bunch of boys at a scout camp, which I could totally 100% see happening, especially because back in the day, I actually was in Boy Scouts, and I could totally see something like this happening. I don't think we did. I'm trying to think. I don't think we did any food related things when I was there, but I do. Yeah, I don't remember any like food related competitions really. Not at scout camp because I think they try to be careful that we didn't eat too much food at scout camp because it's like they only had like a limited amount for the most part. Okay, and now they're saying there's a possible connection with the ghosts and the flapjack. So let's see where this is going. I have no idea. Connection with ghosts possible. Let's see where this is going. Perhaps there is some connection between the flapjacks and the ghost story. The scouts say there is none, but others say that an overworked digestive laboratory and ghosts always do travel together. Really? That like ghosts make you hungry, basically, is what they're saying here. At any rate, Ebb, the colored cook's helper at the camp, says that the ghost of Old Chief Mohawk roams the hills. It was a night or two ago. One of the scoutmasters had just finished telling a ghost story, and Ebb let forth a yell which would have served for a war whoop and catapulted into the cook shed without worrying whether his feet or his head got in first. There are those who say that for a minute the ghost of the chief stood on the edge of the woods and told of the great deeds the red men did about Harper's Ferry years and years ago. Maybe it was the smoke signaling which the boys had been doing during the day that brought the old chief out. Maybe it stirred his ghost memory to think of the times when his tribes let the clouds roll up to the white summer skies as signals. Hogan of the Parksburg, West Virginia troop, and Hetch, a visitor to the camp, have been signaling across the country. Huh. P.S. Wildcats. Signaling leads one to the Wildcat story, and the Wildcat story to the Mad Scott story. Scoutmaster Felmbound of the Rasberg troop went up to Maryland Heights to signal to another party of scouts on Chimney Rock. In the party were Cast Iron Nerve Ray. Dang, that's what a nickname. Cast Iron Nerve Ray, Hogan Khan, R.M. McLeod, and D.M. McLeod, and others. The signaling was kept up so long that when the troops started toward camp, night had fallen. When the boys were in the deepest, darkest part of the woods, only one lamp to light them, a blood-curdling yell came from the blackness surrounding them. They bolted for the camp, where they declared a wildcat had been after them. Nobody in the camp has seen it yet. Well, that's reassuring. I haven't seen it yet. Also, like, again, probably saying that, like, the noise of, like, the whoop of, like, you know, like, the Native American ghost could have been that, maybe? I don't know. It's... Interesting. This is, like, again, like, I feel like they're again, like, trying to, like, discount the ghost story by talking about the wildcats and how loud they are. I don't know. It's... This one, I mean, at first I thought, like, okay, maybe they, like, this is the closest one we've gotten to, like, actually being like, hey, maybe it is ghosts. Maybe it is actually ghosts this time and not a something else. But right at the end here with the Wildcats, one of these days we'll get, like, maybe an actual ghost story. Okay, let's read this next one. Old Town again in limelight. Oh, so this is another one from overseas. Stockwell, England, where a hidden church over 600 years ago has just been discovered, as has hitherto been chiefly famous for its ghost, which set all London in an uproar in 1772. Making the furniture dance and the crockery fall was the ghost's specialty. Though by way of variety, an egg once flew across the room and hit the cat. Aw, poor cat. Having excited London and frightened Stockwell, the ghost retired, leaving behind a firm belief in his supernatural origin, until many years later a servant admitted that long horse hairs attached to the crockery and wires to the furniture had enabled her to play the ghost so successfully that frightened beholders never even detected such open feats as throwing the egg at the cat. Again, wow, again, a complete... At first I thought, like, okay, this is an... Oh, because the few stories that we have seen where it's like they don't, like, discredit or discount the ghosts are from overseas, like things in Europe, which makes sense because, like, things are older in Europe. But this one, they literally, like, straight up say, like, oh yeah, no, this servant was faking it the whole time, using long horse hairs. Frightened beholders never even detected such open feats as throwing the egg at the cat. Why do you have to throw the egg at the cat, though? Why not just throw the egg in general? Why you gotta be at the cat? That poor cat. Man, that cat didn't do anything to you. All right. Let's read this one. Psychic stories. So, okay, this is involving psychic, so maybe this won't have a... Let's see what this one says. All right. Ghosts, not the Ibsen kind, but the real hair-on-end kind of which ye ancient mammy liked to tell in ye olden days down south, are the sum and substance of the new book by Hereward Hereward Carrington under the title of True Ghost Stories. They are not of the fiction kind. Oh, so this is a book. It's a book review. Mr. Carrington is a member of both the British and American Societies of Psychical Research, has written things on occult and psychic subjects, and deals with all such phenomena from the ordinary thought transference ghosts to the phantom armies of France. Not only does he believe in the actuality of ghosts, but in a variety of ghosts. His cases and citations are well authenticated. He describes methods, cases, and reasons of thought transference. He gives a realistic description of how the spirit leaves the body. He relates many instances of physical manifestations of ghosts. So if you wish to travel through Ghostland with one who knows the way and can point out the sights, just engage Mr. Carrington as your guide. As a warning, it is an intensely serious book. Dang, yeah, it's just it's a crummy commercial. I thought we were actually going to get an actual story, but no, it's an ad for a bunch of stories about, aw, dang it. Man, I thought we were, I thought we were getting something else. Okay. Okay, sorry, I just need to check something real quick. All right. So that one was kind of a bust. All right. Let's go ahead. Let's read this one next. This one looks like it might be like an actual proper ghost story with this one. This looks like it's from a more like local newspaper called the Denton Journal from Denton, Maryland. All right, and it's A Ghost of Chance. Story of the Downfall of a Bashful Man from 1912 by O. Henry. All right. All right, let's go. Actually, a hod, repeated Miss Kinsolving pathetically. Mrs. Uh, Bellamy Belmore arched a sympathetic eyebrow. Thus, she expressed condolence and a generous amount of apparent surprise. Fancy her telling everywhere, recapitulated Miss Kinsolving, that she saw a ghost in the apartment she occupied here. Our uh something guest room, a ghost carrying a hod on its shoulder. Is that say hod? What is a hod? I am not familiar with this term, hod. What is a hod? Oh, okay. So apparently a hod A builder's V-shaped open trough on a pole used for carrying bricks and other building material. Okay, so it's like a... Okay, so it's like a workman's kind of like tool to like move and carry stuff. Okay. Um where was I? The ghost of an old man in overalls, smoking a pipe and carrying a hod. The very absurdity of the thing shows her malicious intent. There never was a Kinsolving that carried a hod. Everyone knows that Mr. Kinsolving's father accumulated his money by large building contracts, but he never worked a day with his own hands. He had this house built from his own plans, but oh, a hod? Why need she have been so cruel and malicious? It is really too bad, murmured Mrs. Belmore, within approving. Oh wait, does it? Oh, here. Okay, so that's the two. That's the two of them talking. Glance of her fine eyes about the vast chamber, done in lilac and old gold. And it was this room she saw it. Oh no, I'm not afraid of ghosts. Don't have the least fear on my account. I'm glad you put me in here. I think family ghosts are ghosts so interesting. But really, the story does sound a little inconsistent. I should have expected something better from Mrs. Fisher Siumpkins? Siumpkins? Sumpkins. Huh. This house, continued Miss Kilsolving, was built upon the site of an old one used by the family during the Revolution. There wouldn't be anything strange in its having a ghost, and there was a Captain Kinsolving who fought in General Greene's army, though we're never been able to secure any papers to vouch for it. If there is to be a family ghost, why couldn't it have been his instead of a bricklayer's? The ghost of a revolutionary ancestor wouldn't be a bad idea, agreed Miss Belmore. But you know how arbitrary and inconsiderate ghosts can be. But she told everybody, mourned Miss Kilsolving, inconsolable. She insisted upon the details. There is the pipe, and how are you going to get out of the overalls? Shan't get into them, said Miss Belmore, with the prettily suppressed yawn. Too stiff and wrinkly. Is that you, Felice? Prepare my bath, please. Do you dine at 7 at Clifftop, Miss Kilsolving? So kind of you to run in for a chat before dinner. I love those little touches of your informality with a guest. Dang. Mrs. Fisher Siumpkins had been the first large plum that the Kilsolvings had drawn from the social pie. For a long time, the pie itself had been out of reach on the top shelf, but the purse and the pursuit had at last lowered it. To some pressure at the command of the Kilsolvings, she had yielded so far as to honor their house by her presence for an evening and night. She had her revenge upon her hostess by relating, with grim enjoyment and sarcastic humor, her story of the vision carrying a hod. To that lady in raptures at having penetrated thus far toward the coveted inner circle, the result came at a crushing disappointment. Everybody either sympathized or laughed. But later on, Mrs. Kilsolving's hopes and spirits were revived by the capture of a second and greater prize. Mrs. Bellamy Belmore had accepted an invitation to visit at Clifftop and would remain for 3 days. Miss Belmore was one of the younger matrons whose beauty, decent, and wealth gave her a reserved seat in the Holy of Holies that required no strenuous bolstering. She was generous enough thus to give Mrs. Kilsolving the accolade that was so poignantly desired, and at the same time she thought how much it would please uh, Terrace? Terus? Perhaps it would end by solving him. Terrence. That's an N. It looked like a U in that one. It's Terrence. Terrence was Mrs. Killsolving's son, age 29, quite good looking enough with 2 or 3 attractive and mysterious traits. For one, he was very devoted to his mother, and that was sufficiently odd to deserve notice. For others, he talked so little that it was irritating, and he seemed either very shy or very deep. Terrence interested Mrs. Belmore because she was not sure which it was. She intended to study him a little longer unless she forgot the matter. If he was only shy, she would abandon him. For shyness is a bore. If he was deep, she would also abandon him. For depth is precarious. Jeez. On the afternoon of the 3rd day of her visit, Terrence hunted up Mrs. Belmore and found her in a nook, naturally looking at an album. Okay. This is a kind of a longer one. Jeez. All right. It's so good of you, said he, to come down here and retrieve the day for us. I suppose you have heard that Mrs. Fisher Simpkins settled the ship before she left. Or scuttled the ship, sorry. Scuttled the ship before she left. She knocked a whole plank out of the bottom with a hod. My mother is grieving herself ill about it. Can't you manage to see a ghost for us while you are here, Miss Belmore? A bang-up swell ghost with a coronet on his head and a checkbook under his arm? That was a naughty old lady, Terrence, said Mrs. Belmore, to tell such stories. Perhaps you gave her too much supper. Your mother doesn't really take it seriously, does she? I think she does, answered Terrence. One would think every brick in the hod had dropped on her. It's a good mammy, and I don't like to see her worried. I'm sleeping in the ghost chamber, said Mrs. Belmore, persuasively. But it's so nice I wouldn't change it, even if I were afraid, which I'm not. It wouldn't do for me to submit a counterstory of a desirable aristocratic shade, would it? I would do so with pleasure, but it seems to me it would be too obviously an antidote for another narrative to be effective. True, said Terrence, running 2 fingers thoughtfully into his crisp brown hair. That would never do. How would it work to see the same ghost again, minus the overalls and the gold, and have gold bricks in the hod? There was an ancestor who fought against the Britishers, wasn't there? Your mother said something to that effect. I believe so. One of those old chaps in Raggian vests and golf trousers. I don't care Continental for a Continental myself. But the mother has set her heart on pomp and heraldry and pyrotechnics, and I want her to be happy. You are a good boy, Terrence, said Mrs. Belmore, sweeping her silks close to one side of her. Not to beat your mother. Sit here by me, and let's look at the album, just as people used to do 20 years ago. Now tell me about every one of them. Who is this tall, dignified gentleman leaning against the horizon with one arm on the Corinthian column? That old chap with the big feet? Inquired Terence, craning his neck. That's Great Uncle O'Branigan. He used to be a Rathskeller on the Bowery. I asked you to sit down, Terence. If you are not going to amuse or obey me, I shall report it in the morning that I saw a ghost wearing an apron and carrying schooners of beer. Now that is better. To be shy at your age, Terence, is a thing that you should blush to acknowledge. Dang, she's like trying to take him over. Jeez. At breakfast on the last morning of her visit, Miss Belmore startled and entranced everyone present by announcing positively that she had seen a ghost. Did it have in Miss Kinsolving in her suspense and agitation could not bring out the word? No, indeed, far from it. There was a chorus of questions from others at the table. Weren't you frightened? What did it do? How did it look? How was it dressed? Did it say anything? Didn't you scream? I'll try to answer everything at once, said Mrs. Belmore heroically. Although I'm frightfully hungry, something awakened me. I'm not sure whether it was a noise or a touch, and there stood the phantom. I never burn a light at night, so the room was quite dark, but I saw it plainly. I wasn't dreaming. It was a tall man, all misty white from the head to foot. It wore a full dress of the old colonial days, powdered hair, baggy coat skirts, lace ruffles, and a sword. It looked intangible and luminous in the dark, and moved without a sound. Yes, I was a little frightened at first, or startled, I should say. It was the first ghost I had ever seen. No, it didn't say anything. I didn't scream. I raised up on my elbow, and then it glided silently away and disappeared when it reached the door. Mrs. Kinsolving was in the seventh heaven. The description is that of Captain Kinsolving of General Greene's army, one of our ancestors, she said in a voice that trembled with pride and relief. I really think I must apologize for our ghostly relative, Mrs. Belmore. I'm afraid he must have badly disturbed your rest. Terence sent a smile of pleased congratulations toward his mother. Attainment was Mrs. Kinsolving's at last, and he loved to see her happy. Nearly all listened politely, accepting Mrs. Belmore's story as a made-up affair, charitably offered as an offset to the unkind vision seen by Mrs. Fisher Sumpkins. But one or two present perceived that her assertions bore the genuine stamp of her own convictions. Soon Mrs. Belmore's maid was packing. In 2 hours, the auto would come to convey her to the station. As Terence was strolling up the East Plaza, Mrs. Belmore came up to him with a confidential sparkle in her eye. I didn't wish to tell the others all of it, she said, but I will tell you. In a way, I think you can be held responsible. Can you guess in what manner that ghost awakened me last night? Rattled chains, suggested Terence after some thought. Or groaned? They usually do one or the other. Do you happen to know, continued Mrs. Belmore with sudden irrelevancy, if I resemble any one of the female relatives of your restless ancestors, Captain Kinsolving? Don't think so, said Terence, with an extremely puzzled air. Never heard of any of them being noted beauties. Then why, said Mrs. Belmore, should the young man gravely in the eye, should that ghost have kissed me, as I am sure it did? Heavens, exclaimed Terence in wide-eyed amazement. You don't mean that, Mrs. Belmore. Did he actually kiss you? I said it, corrected Mrs. Belmore. I hope the impersonal pronoun is correctly used. But why did you say I was responsible? Because you are the only living male relative of the ghost. I see. Unto the third and fourth generation. But seriously, did he Did it... How did you... No? How does anyone know? I was asleep, and that is what awakened me. I am almost certain. Almost? Well, I awoke just as... Oh, can't you understand what I mean? When anything arouses you suddenly, you are not positive whether you dreamed or... and yet you know that, dear me, Terence. Must I dissect the most elementary sensations in order to accommodate your extremely practical intelligence? But about kissing ghosts, you know, said Terence humbly, I require the most primary introduction. I never kissed a ghost. Is it... The sensation, said Mrs. Belmore, with deliberate but uh, slightly smiling emphasis. Since you are seeking instruction, is a mingling of the material and the spiritual. Of course, said Terence, suddenly growing serious. It was a dream or some kind of hallucination. Mrs. Belmore sighed. Uh, the usual fate of ghost seers is mine. She asked resignedly. My privileged encounter with the spirit is attributed to lobster salad or uh, mendacity. Well, I have at least one memory left from the wreck. A kiss from the unseen world. Was Captain Killsolving a very brave man, do you know, Terence? He was licked at Yorktown, I believe, said Terence, reflecting. They say he skedaddled with his company after the first battle there. I thought he must have been timid, said Mrs. Belmore absently. He might have had another battle? Asked Terence dully. What else could I mean? I must go and get ready now. The auto will be here in an hour. I enjoyed Clifftop immensely. Such a lovely morning, isn't it, Terence? On her way to the station, Mrs. Belmore took from her bag a silk handkerchief and looked at it with a little peculiar smile. Then she tied it in several very hard knots and threw it at a convenient moment over the edge of the cliff along which the road ran. In his room, Terence was giving some directions to his man Brooks. Have this stuff done up in a parcel, he said, and ship it to the address on that card. The card was that of a New York costumer. The stuff was a gentleman's costume of the days of '76, made of white satin with silver buckles, white silk stockings, and white kid shoes. A powdered wig and a sword completed the dress. And look about, Brooks, added Terence a little anxiously, for a silk handkerchief with my initials in one corner. I must have dropped it somewhere. It was a month later when Mrs. Belmore and one or two others of the smart crowd were making up a list of names for a coaching trip through the Catskills. Mrs. Belmore looked over the list for final censoring. The name of Terence Killsolving was there. Mrs. Belmore ran her prohibitive pen or pencil lightly through the name. Too shy, she murmured sweetly in explanation. Oh, wow. Okay. Again, yeah, so there another story of it proving it wasn't a ghost. He was being a creep and dressed up as a ghost so that he could kiss a girl. That's basically what happened here. Man tried to kiss a girl and by dressing up as a ghost, and she knew, and because he didn't admit it, I think that's why she says too shy here and why she didn't like him or doesn't accept him. But God, yeah, another example of a story where it's just like, oh, no, just no, no actual ghosts. Still has a logical, like, conclusion. This one though didn't really. It was a little confusing at first because I was trying to figure out like who was who. Also, like you can tell that like just the fact that Mrs. like his mother, Mrs. Kinsolving, is like not like is not she's so worried about how they're perceived and like their like wealth and stuff that like the idea of having a ghost that's like a bricklayer is like that's the horror for her. That's the horror in this case. Having a poor ancestor, not only having a poor ancestor, but a poor ancestor that shows up and wanders around your halls, proving that your ancestors weren't actually rich and wealthy like you claim. Wow. I'd also give it like a 5, kind of like the other one. It was not as interesting or as nice as like some of the other ones. Yeah, we've had better. Okay. Let's go ahead and read this. Actually, wait, let's do a shorter one, actually. We haven't done a shorter one in a little bit. Um, okay, let's read this one. This one's not that long. Because this one is crazy. All-night ghost vigil rewarded. Baker says he knows of a specter that liked pies, explains Sweet Tooth. Emil Carl declares he caught servant after weeks of nervousness. Oh, is this also going to be like a thing where, because this sounds more, this isn't a story. This is like an actual, like, this isn't a fiction story. This is like an actual, like, news story of like something that happened in the community. This one's from January 18th, 1913. Evening Sun. I think that's Baltimore. Yeah, Baltimore. All right. Let's see where this story goes real quick. And it's a short one, so we'll get through it quickly. Frightened by a ghost that has been eating his custard pies and boxes of fancy candies for 3 months under mysterious circumstances, Emil Carl, a baker at 1317 West Baltimore Street, frightened the ghost this morning and says he caught her black-handed in the act. For the last 3 months, Carl has come into his store and found an empty pie plate and missed a box of candy. There was no sign that the door had been tampered with or a latch taken off the window. Footprints were seen each morning leading behind the counters. At times, Carl heard weird sounds in the store. Mrs. Carl and the rest of the household were unable to solve the mystery. The police of the Southwestern District were baffled. Got out his pistol and waited. Wow, that's a very... Okay. Night after night, Mr. Carl, armed, would lie awake waiting the arrival of the ghost. The pies and candies would be missing daily, and he grew uneasy. Last night, he decided to go on watch and stay on watch until he opened his store this morning. His vigil was rewarded. He secreted himself in the adjoining room behind a table. Only his eyes were visible above it. The clock struck 4. A weird rustling sound was heard. The pat of feet was also noticeable. Breathlessly, he fingered his pistol. Black ghost, he says seriously. Oh, I think I know where this is going. Like a streak of lightning, a form passed by him and made for the store. He heard the rattle of a pie plate. Now was the time to do and dare. He rushed out on the ghost. Then he saw the face. It was black. He grabbed in the dark for a hand. He got hold of it and pulling the ghost to him, he recognized a colored servant girl. The black ghost nearly turned white, so sudden was the capture. On bended knee, he says, she pleaded with him not to have her arrested and admitted that she had been taking the pies and candies. She said that the nights Mr. Carl hid downstairs to catch the ghost, she waited until he had given up the watch. Declines to prosecute as he will not be nervous in future. Mr. Carl stated that he was satisfied now that he had located the ghost, and it was getting on his nerves. As it was getting on his nerves, he said he would not prosecute. Okay, that's good at least. I'm guessing it's his servant. Yeah, he says he caught servant, so I guess, yeah, his servant was stealing the pies and candies from him. Huh. Again, yeah, another example of a ghost not actually being a ghost. And this is a real story, apparently. I mean, there's an address. Hold on, wait. Let's look. Let's look real quick and see if we can find that address. Let's see if we can find that address. West Baltimore Street. Oh, okay. There is a location in Baltimore. 1317 West Baltimore Street. Okay, it looks like it's this building right here. But that looks like, okay, that's definitely a more modern building than 1913. Was it 1913 was this one? Which one was it? We just read it. Where did it go? There we go. Yeah. Okay, 1913. Yeah, that's definitely not a 1913 building. That looks more like mid-century. Like 40s or like mid-century. So it was probably like one of these style buildings originally that they probably tore down at some point to put here. So it looks like the actual building is not there anymore. Okay, then. Okay. Get some water real quick. Okay. Let's go ahead then and let's read another kind of longer one. Where was it? I saw it. Here we go. Here's one. The Ghost of a Baby. This one has the potential to actually be kind of just straight up sad, honestly. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right. The Ghost of a Baby. They were telling ghost stories in the dining room of the little seaside hotel, and all the guests were laughing, for the tales were amusing and absurd, as ghost stories ought to be. My friend, the painter, was the only one who did not laugh. Ordinarily, he is the most jolly fellow, so his behavior surprised everyone. Well, old boy, what is the matter with you today? Why do you sit there with a face as if you were attending a funeral? Wasn't the story funny? Yes, he answered. It's not that, but I often think that there is something serious at the bottom of most ghost stories. They either prove that people are not quite sane, that they are suffering from hallucinations or other mental disorders, or they may be a proof that there does exist something which we cannot understand. And, after all, it is rather conceited of us to think that we are able to perceive and understand everything in nature with our poor five senses. Jeez. Wow, that was deep for one of these stories. This is from 1915. Jeez. I once had an experience. Perhaps there was nothing very extraordinary about it after all. And still, whenever I think of it, I turn hot and cold all over. And at any rate, it keeps me from laughing at supernatural things. Do you want to hear it? I can tell it in a very few words. One summer, about 10 years ago, I was very nervous from overwork. I felt a desire for peace and solitude, so I went to one of the islands in the bay, a long, narrow island where only very few people lived. When I mentioned where I was going to one of my friends, he laughed and said that if I intended to live on that island, and particularly if I intended to stop at Gunnar House, I must look out for ghosts. People talked of babies walking there. I laughed and said that baby ghosts are something I had not heard of yet, but that I should certainly keep my eyes open. It was late in the evening when I arrived at the house. It was standing near the northern end of the island on a narrow strip almost surrounded by the sea and sheltered from the wind by an old garden and park with dark fir trees. Nothing was in order in the house, and I had to sleep on a mattress on the floor. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I do not know why, but I felt as if there was some Bori. I think that's supposed to be somebody, and they just misspelled it. I got up and lit a candle. Of course, I found nothing. So, rather annoyed with my own foolish idea, I lay down again and slept well until morning. In the morning, my valet came. Yes, yes, I did have a valet, an old sailor who had given up the sea. His love was about equally divided between me and his whiskey bottle. He used to pat it tenderly and say, when he drank from it, the liquor clucked away down into his stomach. This old sailor and his dog were my only companions, and for hours I would sit alone, painting the wild landscape. Often I painted until it was almost dark, and then when I walked uh, homeward, the wind howled and sighed dismally in the old trees, which waved their branches as if they were gesticulating and talking together. In the night when I woke up, I looked out the window and saw a hazy mist among trees and bushes, and I felt a strange shudder in the air which I could not explain, and which made me think of the ghost of the poor little baby that was said to be unable to find peace in its grave, and perhaps was looking for a mother to keep it warm. After a while, this uncanny feeling increased. I felt as if some unknown person was sitting next to me and disturbing me when I was painting. I returned to town for a while, met old friends and acquaintances, and felt much better than I had ever done at Gunnar House. Of course, I do not believe in ghosts, I told my friends, but still there was something beastly uncanny about everything up there. I think I shall give up the house. And I did. I went back and said to old Alexander, say, Alec, I am going back to town again. Will you help me to pack my things and get me away? He did, and the next day we caught the steamer. It was not a very cheerful place, said Alec, as we were sitting on the deck, and nobody knows what I found out there. What did you find? Well, it was the dog that I found. It was the dog that found it. Every time we went into the old brew house, he bristled and howled. At first, he looked at me so earnestly that I knew there must be something that matter. He sniffed and began to dig a hole in the floor. I took a spade and helped him, and we found the skeleton of a baby. Good Lord, Alec, what did you do with it? I read a paper over it and buried it again. Are you sure it was the skeleton of a baby? So sure as I am sitting here. Besides, it did not surprise me so much. I knew that many years ago a young lady used to live there. I still remember her, tall, dark, and very pretty. Miss Tepic was her name, and she was the daughter of a captain. Many stories were told about her love affairs, but one year she began to grow funny. She would not see anybody, and at last she went to Australia. Well, I don't know anything for certain, but if she sinned, I am sure she paid for it. It is her bad conscience that haunts the island. I nodded my head. Shortly afterward, I went back there and painted a picture, the ghost of a poor, restless baby. It was very weird, people said, but still, it was realistic, for it was just what I saw when I was sitting there alone among the tall, dark firs that were always whispering and singing. Whoa. This is our first, like, actual ghost. Look at that. From 1915, like, the same era. But this is our first one where I feel like it's like an actual ghost. Also, it was genuinely creepy and like sad because, it has to do with an actual ghost in this case. Wow. That's crazy. This was a good one. It's very sad though, because it is, a baby. But yeah, there's nothing here that it's like, oh, it wasn't actually a ghost. Yeah, there's nothing here that like tries to disprove it or anything. And just how he talks about it and everything. It's way darker, I feel like, than a lot of the other ones. Yeah, this is the best one I think we've read so far. At least tonight. And the only one that like actually is a ghost. Wow. That's crazy. Okay, there are a few other ones here that we haven't read yet. We read that one. That one. We read that one. We read that one. Okay, there's let's read this one because this one I think has to do with one that we read last time. What we read on Wednesday. Because this has to do with the Kaiser and like a ghost that's supposedly haunted, that like haunts the German royal family. Because there was a article from the last one we read that talked about like ghosts of royal families and how there was a ghost that like supposedly haunted the German, like the Kaiser like the royal family, and would show up before like bad things were about to happen. So let's see if we can find that here. All right. So Kaiser fears ghost. Dread of ghastly visitor greater than over prospect of trial for atrocities. Visitation said to foretell near approach of death. Legend says she made first appearance to Hohenzollerns in 1598. Yeah, this is 1919, so this is right after World War One. All right, let's learn about the German ghost. The former Kaiser, at his refuge in Amerongen, Holland, is more worried over the expectation of a visitation from the Hohenzollern family ghost than over prospects that a tribunal of the five great powers will try him for his crimes, according to the Watch on the Rhine, a newspaper published by the American Army of Occupation at Outernach, Germany. Copies of the newspaper have just been received here. The special ghost of the Hohenzollern family is known as the White Lady. Yep, that's what we read in the other article. For centuries, it has been tradition that her appearance means the imminent death of the monarch who sees her. The legend is of venerable age, for the first account of her appearance dates from 1598. It is a family ghost. It's a family ghost. It's a family man. The account of the one-time Kaiser's terror was as given to the Watch on the Rhine follows. The Kaiser in his haven of refuge at Emmeringen may suffer from dyspepsia, ear trouble, paralysis, nightmares of St. Helena, and strange visitations, but if we are to believe reports, his greatest agony comes from his expectations of a visit from the White Lady, the family ghost of the Hohenzollerns. The appearance of the White Lady is supposed to portend the death of the monarch whom she visits. For many centuries past, stories have been told of her appearance before the rulers of Prussia just before their deaths. There are many stories of the origin of this apparition. The tale most widely assented is that the White Lady was Kunigunde, Countess von Plassenburg, but when a girl she was married against her will, or when but a girl, sorry, I was confused by that second, I read that wrong. When but a girl, she was married against her will to an old count, Sigmund von Plassenburg, who died a few years later. Free then to do as she chose, she fell in love with Albert of Nuremberg, one of the ancestors of the House of Hohenzollern, but he did not return her love. Thinking that he objected to her 2 children, she had them slain. But instead of marrying her, Albert had her seized, tried, and condemned to death. When the time for her execution came, she pronounced this curse on Albert: "When you come to die, I shall be there to haunt you, and no member of your family and your descendants but shall be troubled by me at the time of his death." The first appearance of the ghost to any of the Hohenzollern dynasty, so far as we can learn from history and legend, was at the time of the death of John George of Brandenburg in 1598. From that time on, she is purported to have appeared many times. When Frederick William, the father of Frederick the Great, was an old man, ill and half starved, the family nemesis appeared to him, a tall figure in white with arms outstretched. He died 2 days later. It is said that Frederick the Great laughed at the superstition and declared he would like to meet the White Lady. According to the story, he heard a swish of garments behind him and turning, beheld a white-clad phantom. The king advanced towards the spirit, half suspecting some trick, yet half in terror, but it finally vanished. 4 days later, he died. In 1840, just before the death of King Frederick, a whole detachment of the palace guard is said to have seen the White Lady, and when old William I died, servants and guardsmen alike asserted that they saw the apparition. The White Lady is also reputed to have put in her appearance when the Kaiser's father was nearing his end. Wow. Interesting. When did he... When did he die, though? I'm curious if, like, there actually was, like, truth to the story and he actually died, like, not long after supposedly seeing... Well, actually, no, the article doesn't say that he saw the ghost. He just says that, like, he's afraid that he's going to see the ghost. He's afraid of dying. That's all that it is. So let's see, hold on, when did he... Okay, hold on. Okay, Willem II. Oh, apparently he didn't see the ghost because he lived for another, like, 30 years. Or 20 years. He died in 1941. Huh. Yeah, so I guess he didn't... Well, he didn't... I guess, yeah, I guess he didn't see the ghost, because he lived for another 20 years after this, roughly. That's good, at least. Okay. Let's see. How many more do we have left here? Okay. Let's read this one next. This isn't a super long one. At least I don't think it is. It's decently... It's a decently long one. But it seems to be another example of, like, them disavowing Ghost. Because this is from 1913. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and read this one. Refuse to believe that ghosts exist. Scientific men here not moved by Sir Oliver Lodge. Some known Britain. Dr. Herbert Spencer Jennings not much impressed by reports of his investigations. Scientific men in Baltimore found nothing which imposed upon them a brand new belief in ghosts in the address of Sir Oliver Joseph Lodge before the British Association for the Advancement of Science at Birmingham, England. It is whispered that some scientific men are most remarkably human for all of their science, so much like their unscientific brethren that they do believe in ghosts. But they appear to be few in Baltimore, and those who have not been afraid to go home in the dark in the past are not shaking and jumping as unexpectedly footfalls today. Yeah, basically just saying that basically like there are scientists who do believe in ghosts, but like it's not. It seems to be more of an English thing, not a British or in Baltimore. Baltimore scientists apparently don't believe in ghosts. Explains he's human through scientific. It was explained by one man privileged to write several degrees behind his name that the male human creatures who go into science are really drawn from the same species which goes into car conductoring and driving pigs to market. There is no accounting for the belief of car conductors and pig drivers, and there is no accounting for the beliefs of doctors, and there is no accounting for the beliefs of any of those between. A man may be a scientist and yet religious. He may be extremely unscientific and yet a free thinker. It's one of the amusing inconsistencies of this life. It was agreed, however, that Sir Oliver voiced a very just criticism of the men of the laboratory and of the crucible, when he said that they were too much inclined to deny absolutely the truth of phenomena for which they themselves could find no evidence. JHU men know Sir Oliver. There are among the members of the faculty of Hopkins University a number of men who have met Sir Oliver. One of them said today that the president of the English Society for Psychical Research had long ago abandoned his work as a psychist, physicist. Jesus Christ. Oof. No, it's not physicist. It's psychicist. Physicist, which is a PH. Psychicist. and although remaining principal of the University of Birmingham, had wandered far from the fields which form the peculiar hunting ground of scientific men. Not impressed by reports. Another, Dr. Herbert Spencer Jennings, Henry Walters, professor of zoology, had this to say: I must confess that I haven't followed closely the results Sir Oliver Lodge has obtained in the field of psychical research, but what I have heard about those results has not impressed me. Sir Oliver is one of the few scientific men of achievement who have turned to psychical research. He is a physicist. That's physicist. He's a physicist, and the physicist is more inclined toward such things than is the biologist. The address contains a just criticism of the tendency of some scientific men to deny certain phenomenon. Seems to give no new grounds. He appears, however, to give absolutely no new grounds for his belief in discarnate mentality. He merely reiterates what he has said previously. The truth is, it seems that there is no evidence to support such a belief, just as there is no evidence to contradict it. There is no evidence bearing upon the subject. Sir Oliver Lodge appears to believe, though, Professor Jennings has reminded, that ghosts have form, weight, and substance. Professor Jennings merely laughed at that. Do any scientific men believe in ghosts? He was asked. He laughed again. I wouldn't like to say that none do, he replied. All sorts of men go into science. And that's where the interest of the zoologist, the physicist, the chemist, and the biologist, in Sir Oliver's opinions, seem to end. They admit that there may be a field beyond the science of today yet to be explored, based on theory of matter. They all believe in the indestructibility of matter, and they see how through this Sir Oliver arrives at the conclusion that something survives after death. Although most of them, when they get to that door, slam it shut and don't attempt to explore the chamber. They admit that there may be a day when the physical changes which accompany human thought may be analyzed. They agree that with him in his demand for greater liberality among scientific men, but they insist that he must make a ghost materialize before their eyes before they will believe that ghosts represent anything but a disordered laboratory in the middle of man, his laboratory of digestion. Wow. Huh. His laboratory of digestion.
That's pretty neat.
That's... wow. Hey, Avocado. Hello, Avocado, thanks. Thank you for following. Welcome on in. But, yeah, we are currently reading these old ghost stories. This one, though, wasn't really much of a story. It was more actually a thing of disproving ghosts. Apparently, while they're, I do like the part where he talks about like how like there are problems in the scientific community about just overall not listening, or just like so headstrong in their beliefs that they don't, yeah, like right here, for greater liberality among scientific men, so that they, yeah, just kind of don't, but they don't think that applies to ghosts, apparently. Apparently that's what they think, that this doesn't apply to ghosts. All right, so let's move on then to our next one here, which I think will be this, no, not this one, this one. Ghosts I Have Seen. A truly spooky book. Okay, let's go ahead and read this one. Books to be read or read about. So this is actually a book, but maybe she'll talk about like some of like the ghost stories that she's had like in this book. All right, here we go. Since ghosts have found their way into polite society, many and numerous have been the literary offerings about or supposedly by spooks. Um, Among the conglomeration of such books, pamphlets, leaflets, and whatnot have been steadily pouring from the presses ever since the somewhat dramatic entrance upon the world stage of Ouija is a book entitled Ghosts I Have Seen. Hi, Avocado. Welcome on in. Uh, by Violet Tweedale, an Englishwoman. The very cover of the book, which pictures two staring eyes, is sufficiently to attract the attention of the reader. But interest does not stop with the cover design. Not much. For from the minute one opens the book and reads right at the start about silk dress and rampus, two of Miss Tweedle's childhood ghosts, one meets such an array of spooks, real ones too, according to the author, that it is guaranteed that even the most skeptical reader will receive a few good old-fashioned thrills and chills. Far be it, of course, from the reviewer to cast the shadow of doubt on the alleged reality of the exciting and decidedly nerve-wracking experiences so thrillingly related by Mrs. Tweeddale. But what matters it whether the stories be actual or imaginary. Suffice it to say that the book is highly entertaining, and the many adventures and experiences with ghosts, the majority of them of the decidedly hair-raising and spine-wrinkling sort, make intensely interesting reading. It is hard, however, to believe, as the author would have us do, that the following incident taken from her book actually occurred. Wow, so the reviewer is basically saying that he doesn't believe that that a lot of this stuff occurred, but it is at least entertaining, which I think is good. You know, it's good to have like an entertaining look at this, you know. All right. So let's see what's this excerpt. I awoke to pandemonium. My room was in a hubbub of high-pitched noise, screams of glee and frolic, shouts of thin laughter, pattering of feet with little thuds interspersed. The sounds were all pitched in an unknown key. They can best be described as ordinary sounds, intensely rarefied and pitched in so high a treble that they had run out of the scale altogether. Summoning all my courage, I sat up and switched on the light. What I saw must read like pure nonsense to the majority, but nevertheless, I mean to record the facts as they have happened to me. About a dozen small forms, half man, half animal, were playing leapfrog around the room. They were about 3 feet in height, some slightly smaller, and, though their bodies and legs were human, their heads resembled apes. I forgot all about being afraid. They were so amazingly grotesque, and they were so thoroughly happy. One would go down on all fours, and the creature immediately behind would leap his back, and so on down the chain. And all the while they kept up the shrill, high-pitched note of intense enjoyment. They took no heed of me, but gradually their energies flagged. They faded and became blurred in outline. One by one, they simply went out, like sparks, until not one was left. Wow, that is not at all where I thought that story was gonna go. Like, she basically saw, like, monkeys. That just sounds like monkeys. If they had, like, bodies and legs of humans, but heads of, like, apes. And they were slightly smaller. That just sounds like a monkey. She had a dream about monkeys, is what it sounds like. Not all of Mrs. Tweedle's ghosts, however, were night visitors. A number appeared in broad daylight, and as early as 9 o'clock in the morning, when all perfectly respectable ghosts are supposed to have returned to where they belong. One particularly gruesome experience, she relates, as having taken place while she was walking along a country road, bright and early one morning, when she noticed in front of her the figure of a woman dressed in white and with a sunbonnet on. No matter whether or not she hurried, she was unable to come up with the figure, it keeping equidistant from her. Then she saw a friend approaching, but let Mrs. Tweedle tell it. Ah, thought I, as I at once slowed down to draw breath, she will have to pass her, and she'll tell what her face is like. I kept eyes and attention closely fixed on the two figures as they drew near one another. Now the stranger appeared to be exactly an equal distance between us, when lo, she simply vanished. How well I remember N running up to me, and without any greeting, we both simultaneously burst out, "Did you see her?" N told me that inside the poke bonnet was empty. The lady had no face. Ooh, creepy. And so on. The author has been a lifelong student of the occult, and she is known as one of the most adherent, the most ardent psychical research workers in England. Many great personages, including the Connaughts, Lady Cathanis, Lord Leyden, Robert Browning, Lady Campbell, and others in the nobility, with which Mrs. Tweedale is herself connected, are intimately mentioned in the book. Regarding the truth of her stories, Miss Tweedale says, I claim that my stories have a special interest and value because I have tried to restrict them to such as can be attested to by living persons closely related to me, either by friendship or by family ties. In a very few instances, I have been obliged for obvious reasons to suppress the names of houses and hotels. In these cases, I am ready personally to supply all information to genuine students of the occult if they are willing to approach me privately. It's interesting that like she's just straight up saying, oh, like, you know, connected to the occult she is, which is something that I feel like most people, like, that's seen as like not a good thing nowadays. Compared to, like, you know, like, I feel like that's considered like, you know, like, oh my god, they're into crazy, you know, like devil worship or something like that. So just to straight up, you know, say it is interesting. Oh, and that's her. That's the author of the book. Huh. All right. So yeah, so that's Violet Tweedale. Ghosts never have the slightest temerity in appearing when Violet Tweedale is about. Consequently, she is a person around whom extraordinary interest centers. Mrs. Tweedale has encountered all sorts of and kinds of ghosts and has never flickered an eyelash. But then, that may be because she goes in for ghosts just as you or I perhaps might go in for golf or swimming or snake raising. Mrs. Tweedale was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, the daughter of the late Robert Chambers. In 1891, she married C. Tweedale of Balcolly, Turriff, Aberdeenshire. She has 25 novels to her credit and is still grinding the literary mill. Mrs. Tweedale is connected with the nobility and has entry into the most exclusive society circles. Traveling, music, painting, needlework, and psychic research are her favorite recreations. Huh. Interesting. I do like that, like, even though I do like that they basically they do, like, the author of this critique like does say, like, yeah, they might not be true, but they're still entertaining. Which honestly I appreciate. Like, that's the thing about a good ghost story. If a good ghost story is like at least entertaining, you know, I'll, you know, at least get that goodness like out of it. All right. So I think, let's see, how many, do we have any? Okay. We got the doorway one. This one. Oh yeah, the Kaiser Ghosts, we saw that one. Okay. There's this story, which I think this will be our final one for this stream. So it's getting late. And we're coming up on 3 hours now. So this will probably be our last story for today. Accounted for the ghost. Really nothing remarkable when the facts were made plain to the perturbed ones. Okay, judging by that title, this is probably going to be, again, a ghost story that isn't real. Okay. Accounted for the ghost. Really nothing remarkable when the facts were made plain to the perturbed ones. It was a good ghost story that went the way of the wastebasket recently, up in the neighborhood of U Street and Florida Avenue, and all on account of a little child. Oh, did they find out like the kid was doing something? For several nights, the people in that vicinity have been wrought up over a strange phenomena appearing in a deserted building in one of the neighboring side streets, relates the Washington Star. The building, by the way, was merely temporarily vacant, but deserted sounds more ghost-like. To watchers, there appeared from time to time in the front windows of the upper stories of the deserted building a ghoulish light of that particular pale blue color affected by ghosts of standing. Its corpse-like hue would flicker a few creepy flickers and then vanish anon. Lights always vanished anon in a ghost factory, or a ghost story. Why did I say factory? I guess factory and story kind of look similar, but like, I don't know. Anyway, sorry. For a fact, it was a funny sort of thing, as the good people expressed it, one to another, that this gruesome radiance should suddenly light up in the building in such a respectable neighborhood and then suddenly blot itself out, without any more reason for the blotting out than for the flickering. Men rushed in suddenly during these flickers, only to find nothing. Small and timid servant girls, without something, stayed in after dark, and it bid fair to become the light that made Washington famous when one evening a little girl whose nursery overlooked the haunted house, peeping out the window, saw the ghost. It was an electric car scurrying along Columbia Road, some distance away, which, as it swung, joggling around the curves of that thoroughfare, flung, for a few moments, the beams of its headlights into the rear windows of the houses. From these, the light was reflected palely on the front windows, and there you are. Dang, so it wasn't okay. When it said like, that's actually not the direction I thought it was gonna be, because when it said at the top that like were made plain, it was like, and all on account of a little child right here. I thought it was gonna be like, oh, a kid was like sneaking into the building and just like lighting something up. But no, it was the kid who basically saw that, you know, oh, this was happening. And pointed it out. It took a kid to like figure all of this out. That's funny. Wow. All right. So I think that covers all the stories I got for today. Perfect timing too with that. So out of all the ones that we read today, I think these were some of the favorites. I did like the Ghost in the Doorway one because it is just a classic story of like a girl. Also the fact that we know like exactly who like gave it. I liked this one just because like there's like more of like a kind of like a law mystery with it, because they claim the ghost was like, you know, this guy who was stealing flowers, but I'm pretty sure just based on like the description here and everything that it it wasn't the person who was doing it. Like, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't the person that they caught. I think it was just they got the wrong guy. But in terms of like actual story, I think this one was the best one because this story right here was the first story where it was actually a ghost. Like everything else, like all the almost every single story we've read tries to discredit like it being an actual ghost for the most part. But this is the only one that like for the most part like actually seems like an actual ghost. Also, it was like genuinely creepy and genuinely like sad. Which I mean, like when you have a title like Ghost of a Baby, I feel like that's kind of expected. Um, but yeah, I think that's gonna do it for today. We found some really good stories today. Is this gonna load or? There we go. But yeah, so that's gonna, after going through a lot of these, we found some good ones. But I think, yeah, we're gonna call it here for today. And this was a good stream though. I had fun. I really do love reading these stories because you never know what you're gonna get sometimes. I do think that like the Vermont ones were a little bit better than these, but I think that just could be. I feel like New England is just in general like a better place where you get ghost stories, just in general. Um, but yeah. So let's go ahead and let's head on back to our office here. All right, here we are. All right. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today, folks. Hope you guys had a great time today. If you're new here, I'm not a professor, but you can call me Nap. I stream every Sunday and Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we do streams like this where we read historical documents and do historical research and stuff like that. But sometimes I also do guerrilla streams, like outside of my normal, stream days. So if you want to know next time I go live next, make sure you go ahead and follow. And let's see, what else? I do have a YouTube channel if you want to check that out. Link down below, where I've uploaded some shorts on some of the stuff that we found on some of our other streams. Also, I do have a Twitter if you want to follow me there, so that way you know also when I go live next and if there are any updates with the stream. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So next stream, like I said, will be Wednesday, around 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be looking again for more creepy ghost stories, and we'll see what we find. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today, folks. Hope you guys all have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. Great rest of final days of your weekend. I hope you have a good I hope you have a good start to your work week. I'm not a professor, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.